The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite. Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy anything based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Welcome to the podcast on Thursday, the 3rd of December 2020. On the podcast today, Jonathan Tobin, Managing Director of Arix Bioscience, talks about one of their portfolio companies, Artios Pharma, that's announced a global strategic collaboration with Merck that could be worth billions of dollars. Also on the podcast, George Frangeskides, Executive Chairman of Alba Mineral Resources, discusses a potentially significant discovery during its drilling campaign at the Clogau Gold Mine in Wales. Plus, Vadim Alexandre, Head of Healthcare at SP Angel, discusses Polarean Imaging, as research shows using their tech, COVID-19 could be causing lung abnormalities. And of course, it's just before the company finds out if it's going to be awarded priority review from the FDA. And as always, at the end of the podcast, I have two lists for you. The top 5 most followed companies on Vox Markets in the last 24 hours, and the top 5 most liked RNSs too. By the way, you can see both these lists, top 10 versions of these lists, at voxmarkets.co.uk. We'll also see lots of other content. In fact, it's an article here on Iconic Labs, one on Goldstone, one on Arix, of course, the COVID-19 index. Biggest riser on the index today is N4 Pharma, up 47.5% to 8.8 pence. Biggest faller, Modern Water, down 10%, 2.7 pence. Check that out at voxmarkets.co.uk.
Vox Markets is an online community of investors that runs a free mobile and desktop platform that allows you to track news and updates about any UK-listed company, offering RNS push notifications, detailed charts, pricing data, and much more. Find out more at voxmarkets.co.uk/app.
And joining me on the podcast right now is Jonathan Tobin, Managing Director at Arix Bioscience, ARIX. Jonathan, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Some more good news. Another big company, looking at your portfolio of companies there, Artios and Merck, announced global strategic collaboration, and we'll talk about that. But if someone's sitting there right now listening to this, Arix Bioscience, what do they do then? Can you explain what you do, Jonathan?
Arix is a global venture capital firm focused on biotechnology. We are listed on the main market in London, and we also have team members in Boston and Munich. So we cover the major transatlantic healthcare markets of the US and Europe. We have a team of experts with decades of experience in investing and in the industry itself. And we have, over the last 4.5 years, put together a portfolio of 12 very high quality biotech companies, 10 of which are now in the clinic and have many catalysts over the next 12 months.
Excellent stuff. And one of those is Artios, which mentioned they signed a strategic collaboration with Merck. Could you start by telling us a bit about Artios and what they do, Jonathan?
Yes, Artios is a company that we first invested in September 2016. We were one of the first investors into the company and are now the largest shareholder of the company. So the company was set up by a couple of serial entrepreneurs in the oncology space, Neil Martin and Graham Smith, who both developed a drug called Lynparza, which has now treated hundreds of thousands of patients with ovarian, breast, prostate, pancreatic cancers, and is now doing $4 billion of sales. And that drug it's the first drug based on the premise of DNA damage response, which is a way of targeting the intrinsic genetic weaknesses in cancer. And thanks to breakthroughs in genetic diagnostics, you can identify specific genetic vulnerabilities in a patient. And if they have those particular mutations, you can apply these different sorts of drugs which specifically target the cancer cells and leave the healthy tissue unharmed. And Artios has taken this premise to a whole load of new drug targets which can help other different types of cancers with different genetic alterations. We have 2 very exciting new targets, polymerase theta, where they have the first-in-class drug for that target, and that will be going into the clinic in a matter of weeks. and a compound inhibiting ATR, which is another target for different genetic weaknesses of different tumor types. And again, that will also be going into patients in a matter of weeks. And then a whole pipeline of new targets, a number of which inhibit enzymes called nucleases, which are all novel. And that work actually results from a collaboration that we did very early on with the University of Masaryk in the Czech Republic. And some of those targets, 8 of them, are now the subject of this global collaboration deal with Merck.
Yeah. Well, this deal, I was looking through it there, and some big figures in there. So can you tell us a bit more about this and the potential value generation for Artios?
Sure. So in order to get access to Artios's expertise and technology, Merck are paying the company $30 million up front. And they have the right to opt in to up to 8 novel targets. They will pay for the R&D work. And when they opt into a target, there are cash payments in the tens of millions to Artios. And the total value of the collaboration to Artios is $7 billion over its lifetime.
Wow.
The key thing about the collaboration is that it enables Artios to access Merck's development expertise. They're one of only a small handful of global pharma companies that have expertise in this very niche area. And it also leaves their 2 most advanced assets, the polymerase theta and the ATR inhibitors, unencumbered. And it provides non-dilutive capital for them to do more work developing value through those assets as well.
Yeah, recently we spoke about another of your private portfolio companies, Velos Bio, and its acquisition by Merck again, but $2.75 billion. Do you think, Artios could be acquisition target as well?
Well, any of our companies are acquisition targets.
Mm-hmm.
What we know is that the industry is very short on novel cancer targets. As you've seen with Velos, when you have a novel cancer target with early clinical validation, the amount that pharma companies are willing to pay is enormous. Artios is in the same category. We have a team of serial entrepreneurs that have developed drugs like this before. We have a first-in-class drug in Pol Theta, which is looking extremely exciting, and the company is now moving imminently into the clinical stage. And so, anything like that is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, when will you receive the proceeds from the Velos Bio deal, then, Jonathan?
Yeah, the deal's set to close before Christmas, so we will receive the proceeds, which will be approximately £142 million by this side of Christmas.
Okay, all right. And going back to Artios there, what's the next steps there?
So next steps are really to move the 2 lead assets into phase 1 testing, and that's the ATR inhibitor and the polymerase theta inhibitor. Those will be entering phase 1 trials in the US and UK shortly. And that really signals a major transition, sort of graduation of the company from a preclinical research science-based company to a development company. We've started to build the team in the States. We've hired a chief business officer who actually led this Merck transaction in New York. We're now hiring additional senior team members in the States. And I think you'll see over the next 12 months, this company, which has been relatively in stealth mode, really start to come to the forefront of our portfolio. And fortunately, we're the largest shareholder in the company, own just under 13%. Mm-hmm. We have 4 strategic pharma companies in the stock already, including Merck, who actually were an early investor. So they're very strategically invested in Artios. We also have Novartis, AbbVie, and Pfizer. So 4 pharma companies already invested in the company, moving into the clinic. So far, the data all looks highly encouraging. And so this is one of the great prospects in the Arix portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And just take us through, if you could, some other sort of milestones or catalysts in the rest of the portfolio, if you could, Jonathan.
Yes. Okay. So, we've got a number of companies that are ready to sort of hit important clinical milestones in the next year. For example, Harpoon, which is listed on NASDAQ, has a number of clinical data points in its prostate and ovarian and pancreatic cancer programs. Aura Bioscience, which is going after a rare type of eye cancer called uveal melanoma, will be announcing long-term follow-up of its phase 2 clinical trial. Logic Bio, which is a gene therapy company that we backed from the beginning, which is one of the first in vivo genome editing technologies, which is treating a fatal inherited liver condition, is starting its clinical trial and will read out data this year. And then other companies that we haven't actually yet announced but are incubating under the surface, will sort of rise to prominence over the next year, and we're feeding the pipeline for, the next 4 to 5 years to come. And what the Velos proceeds enable us to do is really scale up the amount we can invest into both existing portfolio companies and also new companies. And so, we will be adding a select number of new deals to the portfolio over the next year.
Excellent stuff. Okay, well, if someone needs 3 reminders to hit that follow button, Jonathan, please give them right now, if you could.
Well, I think biotech is really one of the most important sectors to society at the moment. And I think that the pandemic and the vaccines has just highlighted that, but also the breakthroughs in oncology and immunology and rare diseases and neuroscience. And the Arix team is really at the cutting edge of that, both ready to access opportunities in Europe and the US. So, we have a team of experts internationally. And I think the third thing is that our portfolio is extremely mature and full of exciting assets like Artios, like Velos, but there are plenty more that over the next 12 to 24 months are going to produce similar, even more exciting news flow than what we've had today.
Yeah, exactly. And you must be trading at a fair discount, including that Merck deal to your net asset value, mustn't you?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So, marvellous stuff, Jonathan. Thanks for that. And like I said, lots going on in the portfolio, so no doubt we'll be catching up in the not-too-distant future. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite.
And joining me on the podcast right now is George Frangeskides, Executive Chairman of Alba Mineral Resources, ALBA is ticker there. George, thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Justin.
And I've just been reading an article online here, Wales Online, which is the Welsh online national newspaper, I suppose, but it's headlines saying most significant gold discovery in decades at famous Welsh gold mines. So you've hit the headlines there with your underground drilling there at Clogau. So we'll get into that in a bit. As always, George, for people listening who are not familiar maybe with the company, just give them a brief summary, because it's not all about Wales, of course, even at the moment it is. Tell us a bit more about Alba, if you could.
Absolutely. We're not all about Wales, although we've done a lot of work in Wales this year in particular. We're in Greenland as well in a big way. We've got 4 projects there. We've been a bit dark in Greenland this year with the coronavirus, not being able to work there, but we hope that that's going to ease up next year. We've got 2 oil and gas investments in Surrey. And we've also got a base metals project in Ireland. So always pretty busy at Alba.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dig into this significant then discovery there. So what have you been doing down there, and what have you discovered, George?
Sure. Well, this is the announcement that we put out yesterday, Justin, that's our results of our underground drilling campaign. So this is our first phase, and we drilled 7 holes. Very good going in the space of a couple of months. It's a pretty constrained environment down underground in the mine, but we got the right drill kit and the right people to drill. So we drilled very successfully, about 560 metres. 7 drill holes, 7 different targets, if you like. And now we've got the results back from the lab on the drill core assays and had some really good results. And what appears to be happening there is that we've intersected quartz veining up to about 550 meters away from what we call the main lode. Now, the main lode was, as it might suggest, it's the main vein where most of historical production, gold production at Clogau took place. Now, we're finding, as I say, these intersections of quartz veins in a couple of places up to about 550 meters away. And the reason we're sort of joining those dots is that the morphology, the stratigraphy, the essence, if you like, of the rocks that we're finding in those intersections are very similar to what is the case in the composition of the rocks in the main lode. So we're typical geologists. I'm not one of those, but my geologists are sort of, as I say, joining the dots, which is what this is all about, really, and saying that what we believe we've found is this extension to the main lode running about, over half a kilometre away from the main lode. Now, that's pretty significant because the main lode was, as I say, the source of a massive amount of the historical production. So we would very much like to find an extension to that zone.
Okay, and so I assume, like I said, potentially significant here. And so then what are you doing next to follow up and to confirm this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, we've got some good intersections, as I said. We've got some good assays as well coming back. And that's very important to bear in mind. This project is a narrow vein, nuggety effect gold deposit. It is not one where you can just pepper it with holes and expect to come up with a resource in a sort of typical homogeneous deposit type of way. This has got to be done in a far cleverer, far more scientific, if you like, way. And it therefore has, more challenges. That's why we do drilling and bulk sampling together, to marry the two bits of information together and work out where the gold is. So we actually hit gold in this drilling. We weren't expecting to hit decent grades of gold because of what I've just said, but we hit 1.16 meters at 0.653 grams per ton, including a quarter of a meter at 1.79 grams per ton. And that's very, very promising indeed, and not, as I say, what we were expecting. So what we will go back in now, Justin, and do, and hopefully very early in the new year, is start to do infill drilling along that 550-metre stretch and just confirm that what we think is going on is indeed going on. If we hit the quartz vein at various more spots along that trajectory, then we'll know that we've confirmed that system extends as far as that. And from there on in, we'd go in and do bulk sampling, pull out tons and tons of material, process it, and see what the grades are. So that's it's pretty standard stuff, really. That's what we have to do. It's not like there's any other alternative. We go in and we infill drill to see that we can confirm up this structure.
Yeah, absolutely. But so far, early indications look good, like you say there. And so, when are you going to be doing that, George? Is that in the new year?
Hopefully in the new year. We're sort of in discussions with the planning authorities. I mean, it's done under what we call permitted development, a bit like if you're building an extension on your house, Justin, on your mansion, should I say? Mm-hmm. That extension is, if you don't make it too big, it comes under permitted development. Might be surprising to listeners to know that permitted development works for all sorts of things, including drilling boreholes. So we would expect to be able to do the next phase under permitted development. We have to put in a notification for that. We'll be doing that very shortly. And so we hope to be ready to start the next phase of underground drilling of surface drilling, should I say, early in the new year. We're doing this from surface. So the next phase will be done from surface. So we're currently drilling from surface now. So we know what we're doing. The rig's there. The rig's not going anywhere. Drilling contractors might go home for Christmas for their turkey and mince pies, and then come back in early January and get cracking on the surface infill drilling. So I say from surface, it's still targeting those underground zones that we're talking about, but just targeting it from surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, George, someone's liking the sound of this, but not yet following the story. If you could give them 3 reasons why they should hit that follow button on your page there at Vox Markets and add Alba Mineral Resources to their watch list, please.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, well, Clogau St David's Gold Mine, number 1. and all the work we've been doing there this year, where we're proving up what we hope to be a commercial mine proposition that we can get into production within a couple of years, with gold prices riding as high as they are. And secondly, Gwynfinith, which we've not talked about much, which is the new tool in our box, where we have picked up a license over the Gwynfinith Gold Mine, which is the second largest producer of gold in the United Kingdom in history, and where we expect to do exactly the same rollout of work that we've done at Clogau St David's. And thirdly, Greenland, where you're going to be hearing a lot more about Greenland in the months to come when that opens up again and we can get in there and drill our high-grade Amitsoq deposit and do further drilling on our high-grade Tule Black Sands ilmenite deposit.
Excellent stuff, George. Good to chat to you. And hopefully, like I say, lots of things going on. We'll be catching up in the not-too-distant future. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate your time.
The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite.
And joining me on the podcast right now is Vadim Alexandre, Head of Healthcare at SP Angel. You all right, fella?
How you doing, Justin?
Yes, I'm good. And there's a big milestone. We've covered Polarean Imaging a lot, and there's a big milestone coming up around the corner there. Monday, I think, is pretty much 60 days since they did an NDA, the FDA. Explain what that's. What do those initials mean, Vadim, if you could?
Yeah, perfect. So what we're waiting for, I'm not sure if it's Monday, but it's give or take a few days, right? So it's imminent, any day up to some day next week. So it's 60 days. What I'm not sure if it's 60 days from the actual submission date, and the exact submission date could move by a day or two. But anyways, don't worry, it's imminent is the point being. They're waiting to know whether they have received priority review by the FDA, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, they submitted what's known as a new drug application, which is an NDA. That's the submission to the FDA for their product, their lead product, which is their xenon drug device combination. What they're waiting on is not the approval. It's that they also requested as part of that submission an accelerated approval date. Okay, and that's what the priority review is. And the FDA has 60 days to answer them, and that's what we're running up. We're running up towards the end of those 60 days. So we will get an answer from the FDA saying whether or not they will get priority review. If they get it, then they will get their approval date given to them, which we expect then sometime in early June, as opposed to early October, which would be the normal 12 months. So it's reduced from 12 months down to 8 months. That's what priority review is. So that's the upcoming date. A little bit confusing there in terms of dates, but basically we will find out whether they will either get their approval in June or in October next year. Yeah, that's what we're waiting to hear.
Yeah, and do you know what's a pity is that they couldn't have. Of course, what I assume what was submit is that COVID has dealt a blow to COVID sufferers. It's affected people's lungs. And in fact, this week, which is probably a bit late now to submit it, but this week there's an article on the BBC which I tweeted out, and it was saying COVID-19 could be causing lung abnormalities still detectable more than 3 months after patients are infected, research suggests. And I looked into that. I was just going through my normal morning sort of macro, sort of podcast, and I just saw this article on the BBC, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I just wanted to read it because it's interesting. Then I started going down saying it uses a gas called xenon during MRI scan. I thought, hang on, that sounds familiar. And then it said, and I sort of, and then it said MRI scans, and there's magnetic resonance and polarized. So Professor Gleason is the guy doing the work. So I thought, hang on, this must be connected. This is too close to Polarean's technology not to be connected. And so I basically Googled him and Polarean, and it came up that he's featured on Polarean's website doing a video about the history of scans and lung function and all that stuff. And then it also said down below, another guy came from Sheffield University, a guy called Professor James Wild. I googled him, and he also came up on Polarean's website. He's submitted 2 papers, clinical 2 papers on it. So it's very much entwined. And good news for Polarean. And you'd think it's a pity they can't have submitted this. They probably submitted something showing the reason why they wanted priority review is it would help people with COVID, surely.
Surely that was part of their reasoning for the priority review request. Absolutely. Look, I haven't seen the actual request, but my point being is you would think that would be one of the reasons for submitting for that request. But yeah, no, definitely good news on the Oxford work that Professor Gleason is doing. We've met him before. He definitely, as you say, there was a symposium that Polarean gave where he spoke, and he uses their technology. He's a good example of investigator-led research, right? So that they've been selling these machines. Remember we talked about Polarean already selling these machines for research use. Here's a classic example of a research use, of this technology. So what he did was, I'm going by the article here. We haven't actually seen the data. This is early stage stuff by Professor Gleason, but he did do an analysis on 10 patients showing that existing scan techniques couldn't pick up what this xenon MRI can in terms of patients with long COVID. So that's very interesting. I mean, he's now proposing to do a 100-patient trial. We'll see what comes out of that. But this is a case in point, classic example of what these research centers are doing. Basically all over the place. So, recently the company sold a machine to MD Anderson in the US, which is a big oncology center. They're doing work in oncology. Toronto Sick Kids doing work in cystic fibrosis. All these different centers are doing work using this technology and demonstrating how it can be used in all these various pulmonary indications. This recent week's announcement, or that was on the BBC, is a classic example of a novel indication in long COVID, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, in fact, Polarean has now actually retweeted that with a link to that BBC site. And it just shows the images, actually, of healthy lungs and COVID-scarred lungs using their, xenon MRI, so polarized gas, and how clear it is compared to normal, sort of images you get from the lungs. You can see it's way in advance of anything at the moment. And, of course, I mean, it'll be good if it was given priority review, but let's be honest, it's 4 months. It'll become a market 4 months
one
faster.
One way or the other. But, absolutely. Exactly. Look, it's a nice to have. If who knows what the probability of success here is? You can never predict the FDA. But, it's a 4-month difference. It would be nice. It would be a nice to have. But if it's not the case, it's back to the original plan, which the company, is well on track. They'll be ready for both either way. I mean, they've been preparing for this launch for years. And you remember we said this in the past. We're not particularly concerned about the regulatory, approval here because xenon gas is well known by the FDA. It has a very, very well established safety profile. It's used as an anesthetic in terms of, previous uses of it at much higher doses, continuous flow. This is a very low dose. That's why the FDA wasn't concerned at all about safety. And usually if you have any regulatory issues, you expect a safety issue here. Here, no one's really particularly concerned. It's a noble gas. It's benign. So, and the phase 3 trials were presented very strong data showing efficacy. So as in, demonstrating against the existing technology that it's, equivalent. And then one last thing, we are they did have a pre-NDA meeting, so they spoke to the FDA before submitting, so they could get their submission just right. So now it's just a question of time, get that approval, and then launch the product. But what is exciting is all these indications, the proliferation of indications, as we always expected, of where this technology can be used. And, Professor Gleason's recent data in long COVID is a very interesting, novel one.
Yeah. But in my simplistic thinking, I'm just thinking first, I got two queries in mind. First of all, I'm thinking the FDA must be quite busy at the moment because, already Britain, of course, has Britain's regulatory body has passed, a vaccine already. And I've seen already, I watched CNBC yesterday, and they're saying the FDA is under a bit of pressure now because Britain is first out of the gates. And so I'm just wondering, how much people, it must be a huge department, of course, massive department, different areas, but I'm just thinking they must be quite busy, and will this be put on the back burner just because COVID vaccines, and if you look at the FDA site, the people going for approval, there's so many things going for approval, from testing kits, everything. I thought, wow, they must be snowed under. And secondly, I thought, how does this news get delivered to the guys like Richard from Polarean? Is it by letter or email or what how is it done?
It's a direct correspondence. I imagine it's by email, but who knows? Actually, I actually don't know the actual mechanism. I think it's by email, but it's directly to the company, and it's. If it's letter, I can imagine Richard looking through every morning for the postman, like you do for your, your exam results or something. Oh no, here's the exam results. But exciting. A couple of days ahead. We'll see. I can't see any reason why it shouldn't be given priority review, but I'm not an expert. But it seems like it's going to help, people with COVID, and we need that, obviously. You're right. That's the thinking, right? That it would. I would like to think it would be stacked into the COVID pile. Of things that the FDA have to review. Yeah. So let's hope, and we'll see what happens. But like I say, either way, it was always a nice to have. It was something they decided to do as part of their submission. So it's relatively new. The submission was only 60 days ago. So if it happens, all the better. If it doesn't, it's okay. It's only 4 months later that we expect an answer.
Yeah, marvelous stuff. Cheers for that, Vadim, and we'll speak to you next weeky.
Excellent. Thanks, Justin.
When hopefully we'll have some good news from the FDA. Cheers, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. I agree. I mean, it is good. It's all nice. It's like that article couldn't have come at a better time. The COVID angle is real. There's people doing work on it imminently, immediately. So, hopefully the stars will align and the FDA will see the value of this for potential long COVID diagnosis and all that kind of good stuff. Things need to be determined still. Like, don't get me wrong. You can't just turn the scan machine on and start testing patients for long COVID, but you can do an emergency trial, maybe that's what Gleason, you certainly got the impression from Gleason that that's what he's doing, right? Yeah. So, he's working, his plan is to do a 100-patient trial. Let's see what happens, Yeah,
exactly. Marvelous stuff. Cheers, fellas. Speak next week.
Thanks, Justin. Take care. Bye.
Okay, it's time for the top 5 most followed companies on Vox Markets in the last 24 hours. They are at 5, Salt Lake Potash, of course, down, suspended on ASX, pending the sort of equity fundraise and debt funding. At 4, Alien Metals, down 6%, by the way, Salt Lake. At 4, Alien Metals, 6.12% up to 1.3. At 3 is Kistos, and that's 136.5. That's up 1%. At 2, Eurasia Mining, down 3% to 40.75. And at 1, Rambler Metals and Mining, non-mover, 0.245 pence. Okay, and top 5 most liked RNSs are, and most read. Let's see what they are. Eurasia is most read. West Kingdom DFS update. It's also the most liked. 2 most liked in top 5. Iconic Labs at 4. New contracts for Joe Media. At 2, Novocyte Holdings and Companies. And at 1, Tech Capital, Bulascara update, and Braveheart and Gene Drive and N4 Pharma are some of the most read there, and Braveheart as well. Check that out at voxmarkets.co.uk. Thanks for listening. Muchos appreciated.
The Vox Markets Podcast with Justin Waite. Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy anything based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.